The NFL divisions are the foundations of the league. They give us structure. Over a third of your regular season games are going to be up against the guys in your division, which has generated pretty much all of the league's fiercest rivalries. It's also led to many debates every single year about whose division is weak and whose division is strong. Well, today we're going to be putting rivalries aside and finding out who could build the strongest team if all of the teams in every division teamed up. So here's the rules. We're going to be picking two coaches, one being the head coach, and they are going to manage their side of the ball on the play calling side, and then another coach to be the coordinator on the other side of the ball. We're not going to be filling up entire rosters. It's going to be 11 players on each side of the ball, and assuming that the rest of the roster is filled up with backups. In this experiment, everyone is healthy, so injuries are wiped away, but that doesn't mean that the injury didn't exist. And so if a player is currently suffering from a serious injury that he's never going to be the same from, we're going to take him in that state after the recovery. So once we've picked the teams, we'll put them into an 8-team playoff scenario and see who comes out on top. If you do enjoy the content, please consider subscribing. It would be very much appreciated. But without further ado, we're going to be starting off with the NFC East: Commanders, Eagles, Cowboys and Giants. In terms of coaching, and maybe I'm biased as a Commanders fan, but if this experiment is just for this 1 year, Dan Quinn is a guy who has come in and turned the Washington Commanders franchise around from a completely dire state, and he's done it in one off-season, completely changing and shifting the culture. And as a play caller, he's also been the mastermind of some really special defenses. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I don't feel like we have a ton of options, but Brian Daboll, despite being in a tricky situation at the moment with the Giants and not always finding success at the moment, but Brian Daboll was the man behind the offense that allowed Josh Allen to transform from a young, raw quarterback constantly making mistakes into one of the few elite quarterbacks in this league. So that's the pairing we're going to go with: Dan Quinn as head coach and Brian Daboll as offensive coordinator. In terms of quarterback, this isn't a difficult decision for me. Jayden Daniels is doing an excellent job as a rookie, but he's still a rookie. And in my opinion, Jalen Hurts doesn't touch Dak Prescott as a quarterback. So Dak Prescott's going to be our quarterback, but he needs protection. I think Tyler Biadasz for the Commanders offers us the best option as a really solid center. And then we're going to take the Cowboys guard duo in Zach Martin and Tyler Smith, and the phenomenal tackle duo of the Eagles in Lane Johnson at right tackle and Jordan Mailata at left tackle. The running back, of course, is going to be Saquon Barkley. And at tight end, whilst Dallas Goedert for the Eagles would have been a good option also, the chemistry between Prescott and Jake Ferguson on the Cowboys, I think, is something we're going to want on this offense. And now at receiver, this is where it gets interesting. AJ Brown goes straight in, no debate about that. But now we have to pick two of this four to go in. And I think the obvious one for most people here would be CeeDee Lamb, especially considering that Prescott has that chemistry with Lamb. But for me, you've got to go and get that explosiveness of Malik Neighbors. I know he's a rookie, and you haven't gotten used to seeing his name in the same conversation as these other guys yet, but I didn't want to overthink it. I just want to go and get a guy who moves the way that Malik Neighbors does. And then as the third receiver, I'm going to be a bit naughty here and take my favourite receiver in the league, Terry McLaurin. I think he's been criminally underrated for years, and now he's finally got a quarterback and an offense that can give him the opportunities, and he is fourth in receiving in the league. And then moving on to the Dan Quinn defense here, it's going to be a 3-4 system, and we have got the assets to put together one hell of a defensive line. Dexter Lawrence is the best defensive tackle in the league, and not only is Jalen Carter a seriously good player in his own right, but in this defensive system with Dexter Lawrence basically playing nose tackle, Jalen Carter is going to be able to just let his pure power and explosiveness free without worrying too much about gap integrity. And then I finished this trio off with Daron Payne before bringing in Micah Parsons as an edge rusher. You combine that with Brian Burns on the other side. We've got the two Bobbies, Bobby Wagner and Bobby Okereke at linebacker. It's going to be Trevon Diggs and Darius Slay at cornerback, with a nice safety duo in Jeremy Chin and CJ Gardner-Johnson. So obviously this team is incredible, but they're all going to look incredible because it's 4 teams combined into one. I'm not sure this is going to be the division that stands up against the rest, but this one might. The NFC North. Really tricky in terms of coaching to decide between Ben Johnson, Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur as the offensive mind, but I've seen the Vikings offense on film and it looks phenomenal. So I am going to go with Kevin O'Connell here. as offensive coordinator, but to be the actual head coach, I think Dan Campbell is exactly the guy we need to build a culture for one season. At quarterback, I think you could make a strong argument for Sam Darnold, considering he knows the Kevin O'Connell system and has performed well in it. For me, it was between Jared Goff and Jordan Love, and I really strongly considered Jared Goff, but I just think Jordan Love gives this offense a little bit more upside. Jared Goff is playing really well at the moment, but even at his best, he can be a little bit rigid, so we're going to roll with Jordan Love. Plenty of help from the offensive line of the Detroit Lions, Frank Ragnow being one of the better centers in the league, combined with Kevin Zeitler and Penei Sewell on the right side. Tevin Jenkins has had a really promising couple of years for the Chicago Bears. He's going to be in there at left guard, and Christian Darrisaw should do just fine protecting Jordan Love's blind side. Running back was tricky because the obvious option is Josh Jacobs. I'm just not sure Josh Jacobs fits this Kevin O'Connell running scheme. The scheme is all about the running back having freedom to move where he sees fit, and the reason Aaron Jones works so well is because he is so elusive and his vision is excellent. So we're actually going to go with Aaron Jones here. We've got a great young tight end in Sam Laporta, and actually not too difficult decisions to be made in terms of the receiving positions. Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore and Amon-Ra St. Brown are the perfect receivers for this offense. This defense run by Dan Campbell, we're going to go with a 4-2-5. The defensive line is going to be basically the Lions defensive line, just with Jonathan Grenard on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. So should be able to generate pressure with Aiden Hutchinson and Grenard. We're going to combine this excellent run stuffing duo in Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader with Alex Anzalone, who is the heart and soul of the Lions defense, and Blake Cashman, who does an excellent job stuffing the run for the Vikings. So despite having the 5 defensive backs and being a little bit coverage heavy in that sense, we should have the personnel to stuff the run. Got a brilliant young nickelback in Brian Branch, arguably the best cornerback in the league with Jalen Johnson. Jair Alexander, when healthy, is right in that discussion as well. A tremendous free safety in Xavier McKinney, and at this point in his career, Harrison Smith being the other safety, probably actually a little bit of a weak link in this team, but his experience should carry him through. So pretty special group here on both sides of the ball for the NFC North. Moving on to the NFC West, and it's got to be Kyle Shanahan as the head coach. Sean McVay is brilliant, and I actually really like the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, for the Seahawks, but you've got to go with Shanahan. And with the options not being quite as strong on defense, Mike McDonald for me was the strongest option. What's really fun here is that the Shanahan offense is brilliant, but it seems to have always been run by less than quarterbacks. We've never seen it run by a quarterback with the talent of a Matthew Stafford. Unfortunately, by the standards we're speaking about in this video, the offensive line is going to be kind of meh. Connor Williams at centre, Laken Tomlinson at left guard and Will Hernandez at right guard. This was the strongest interior for me. Havenstein at right tackle, that's pretty good. And of course, Trent Williams at left tackle is brilliant. Just a little bit underwhelming, really. Running back, of course, is going to be Christian McCaffrey. And Trey McBride is brilliant, the Cardinals tight end, but not over George Kittle for me. In terms of receiver, Cooper Kupp goes straight in. That connection with Stafford, I think he'll be perfect for the Shanahan offense as well. And so it kind of comes down to these three. One of these guys have got to go. I think what DK Metcalf offers in the way of his explosiveness could be brilliant for the Shanahan offense. And I'm not the biggest fan of Deebo Samuel as a receiver. The reason being, I don't think he would work nearly as well in other offenses the way he does for the 49ers offense. But this is the 49ers offense. This is the Shanahan offense. And he does offer a different dynamic. And so unfortunately, Brandon Ayuk gets cut out of this, and we're going to have Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf, and Deebo Samuel. The defensive system is going to be the same as we've just spoken about with the Lions, the 4-2-5. Didn't feel like we had much to work with on the interior. The best I found was Javon Hargrave for the 49ers and Leonard Williams for the Seahawks. But obviously, Nick Bosa is going to make all the difference on this defense. And Jared Verse, despite being a rookie, he's got 32 pressures, which is 10th in the league, so he's having a real impact. I mentioned that the interior is a bit underwhelming. So having Fred Warner and McWilson for the Cardinals as well, very good run stuffer. Should put a bit of a lid on the holes in the run game. Should be finding coverage as well. Got a brilliant guy just to have as a pure nickel in Devon Witherspoon. Tariq Woolen is becoming really an elite corner. And Travarius Ward, not necessarily a superstar, but feel pretty safe having him there, very reliable. But then the safety duo isn't the best. It's Julian Love and Budda Baker. So the NFC West overall, on one hand, it's like Shanahan with Matthew Stafford, how can this go wrong? But you look at everything else in the equation, the offensive line isn't great, the weapons, they don't blow me away, and the defense isn't particularly strong really. But now we get on to kind of an interesting one in the NFC South. Not much to work with in terms of coaching. There's been a lot of new hires coming into the year, but Todd Bowles will do us fine as the head coach. And then at offensive coordinator, I'm going to go with a pretty fresh face in Clint Kubiak. He's a Shanahan disciple and completely turned around the Saints' offense this year, despite them having some real issues after the first couple of weeks. You saw that offense really tick when everyone was healthy, and even then they're not working with a ton of talent, so pretty impressive. At quarterback, it's got to be Kirk Cousins for me. I know that Baker Mayfield's really come on, but definitely trust Kirk more at this point in time. And we're going to be able to protect him, and maybe more importantly, in this Clint Kubiak offense, we're going to have an offensive line that you can run the ball with. Eric McCoy's had some injury stuff, but truly elite centre. Chris Lindstrom, truly elite guard. Robert Hunt at left guard is solid, and Caleb McGarry at right tackle is solid. Tristan Wirfs pushing back more towards the elite category at left tackle. I certainly gave Alvin Kamara a thought at running back, but for me it's got to be the uber talented Bijan Robinson. Tight end was pretty easy. Kyle Pitts, although he's never warranted the 4th overall pick in the draft, he's got all the talent to make it happen. And then a receiver, I gave the Saints guys a thought, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, but ultimately I came to the conclusion that Mike Evans, Drake London and Chris Godwin were clearly the way forward. The Todd Bowles defense is going to be yet again a 4-2-5. It's going to be one hell of an interior with Vita Vea and Derek Brown. Certainly from a run stuffing aspect, that's pretty killer. And then Carl Granderson on the edge kind of goes under the radar. Always super productive for the Saints. And Yaya Diaby, up and coming, sort of yet to prove himself as truly elite, but looks like he could have all the traits. It's solid enough at linebacker, Lavonte David and Shaq Thompson. Marshawn Lattimore is an incredible option to just put a nickel back. Jamel Dean and Paulson Adebo doesn't blow you away, but definitely solid cornerbacks. And about as good as you're going to get in a safety duo in Jesse Bates and Antoine Winfield. So this offense certainly looks interesting to me in terms of I think they're going to be able to run the ball effectively, especially with those big receivers, Mike Evans and Drake London helping out with the blocking, but maybe not inspiring enough in terms of the weapons when we're putting them up against these super defenses. And in terms of their defense, got a couple of incredible duos in Vita Vea and Derek Brown on the interior and Jesse Bates and Antoine Winfield at safety. But you'd probably say those two positions aren't as important as cornerback and edge. That's where you really want to have your truly elite difference makers. So now moving to the AFC, and the AFC East I feel is the type of division that is perfect for this video. The teams as a whole, they have issues that hold them back from being complete teams, but they have all the talent. And so if we put them all together, in theory, it should add up to something special. I can't say we're blessed with coaching options, but we'll certainly take Sean McDermott at head coach. Proven himself as a defensive play caller, certainly seems like a pretty level-headed guy, which I do like in a head coach. It's a fine line between level-headed and not having an edge to you, but I think McDermott seems to have the perfect balance. And as the offensive coordinator, we're going to go with the inexperienced option of Joe Brady, just because there wasn't a ton of other options, and believe it or not, this is going to be Josh Allen at quarterback. Josh Allen's playing at an MVP caliber level under Joe Brady, despite not having a ton of weapons on that offense. So as I say, it's Josh Allen at quarterback. Protection's probably going to be inferior to most of these other teams we've spoken about. It's comparable to the NFC West offensive line. Joe Tippmann, David Edwards and Elijah Vera-Tucker are going to make up the interior. Teron Armstead is a reliable veteran at left tackle, so at least we've got that. And Mike Onwenu is a good tackle as well. But I just feel if you look at a couple of these defensive interiors that we've just looked at in the NFC, Joe Tippmann, Vera-Tucker and David Edwards, I'm not sure that quite holds up. Running back was tricky between Breece Hall and James Cook. Before the season, I would have 100% said Breece Hall, and I like Breece Hall. But just watching James Cook live this year, I've been so impressed. He strikes me as a guy who is just so efficient, super elusive, and seems to have a really good vision. My gut was telling me James Cook, and so I'm going to go with James Cook here. Then we're going to give Josh Allen a reliable and familiar option in Dalton Kincaid. But now we get to the really exciting bit. I mentioned that Josh Allen hasn't really had weapons. Now imagine Josh Allen with Tyreek Hill to throw to. The explosiveness of Tyreek Hill and Josh Allen's ability to let the ball go downfield. And it doesn't just stop there. These are our options as wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. I'm going to put Garrett Wilson straight in. I'm a huge fan of Garrett Wilson, and I definitely think he's the best option out of this 4. Amari Cooper's a good receiver, but really for me it's between Jalen Waddle and Devontae Adams. The easy option would be to go Devontae Adams, and logically I was leaning towards Devontae Adams, but then when I really thought about this as the wide receiver 3, this isn't the guy that has to be super reliable number 1 option. This is just the icing on the cake to give defenses even more nightmares, complete the dynamic of Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, and then I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle. Take the explosiveness and the speed. Not that Devontae Adams would have been a bad option, but this just completes the dynamic to me. Defensively, we're going to go with the 4-3. That's typically what Sean McDermott would want. Quinnen Williams is a top 5 defensive tackle. I honestly probably would have gone with Christian Barrymore as the other defensive tackle, but his blood clot thing seems to be really serious. It does seem like the sort of thing where we just don't know what his future is, and so no point risking it when we've got Ed Oliver to step in, who could make a really strong argument for him over Barrymore anyway. The only thing is, I'm not sure I look at Ed Oliver and Quinnen Williams as an interior that make me feel really good about stopping the run, which is why I would have gone for Christian Barrymore. However, that's where the advantage comes in of having the 3 linebackers, CJ Mosley, Jordan Brooks and Quincy Williams. Should be able to cover up for any slight deficiencies just in terms of run defense in that interior. Feels like a solid run stuffing trio to me. At edge, we've got options. 2 really promising up-and-coming talents in Keon White and Will McDonald. Jaleen Phillips, when healthy, has certainly shown promise at being an elite edge rusher. AJ Epinesa is really solid, but I ended up going with Hassan Reddick. Really weird season with the Jets, but as a talent, he's been super productive in the past, and Greg Rousseau has shown the ability to be pretty productive as well. So we're going to go with Hassan Reddick and Greg Rousseau. And then the secondary looks great. Sauce Gardner and Christian Gonzalez. At cornerback, Javon Holland, an elite safety. And with his flexibility to do anything, he can come down in the box and hit, or he can drop back and be the free safety. We're probably going to have him dropping back and being the free safety a bit more, and have Kyle Duggar for the Patriots being that more traditional strong safety. So AFC East, definitely an interesting one, especially the offense. Josh Allen throwing to these weapons. This one could have a shout at winning it all. AFC North. Head coach would have to be John Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin, and considering we're saying that the head coach has to call plays on their side of the ball, John Harbaugh doesn't actually call plays. He's a bit more of a game managing head coach, and I definitely trust Mike Tomlin to give the team a kick for 1 year, and he's got plenty of ability in terms of play calling. In terms of the offense, I'm going to go with Arthur Smith. Certainly didn't prove himself as a head coach with the Atlanta Falcons, but purely as a play caller, what he did with the Titans, he was the guy that got Ryan Tannehill going. He's a guy that can build a really strong run game, and so it's going to be the Steelers coaching duo in Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith. At quarterback, I really did consider Lamar Jackson here, just because I think the Arthur Smith offense could be really interesting with a quarterback that can run as well. But I just think, especially taking health out of the equation, Joe Burrow is definitely the better quarterback. And we are going to be able to build a pretty serious run game here, because Tyler Linderbaum, one of the truly elite run blocking centers. We're going to take the Browns right side in Wyatt Teller and Jack Conklin. The only slightly weak point is left guard Isaac Somalo, but then we can feel really good about Ronnie Stanley on the left side protecting Joe Burrow. Running back would have been a real point of conversation if it was Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry in their prime, but Nick Chubb coming off his injury, it's just really hard to know what he is right now. So we're going to stick with Derrick Henry. It seems like the Ravens are moving more and more towards Isaiah Likely being the premier tight end, at least the premier receiving tight end for them. But for now, we're going to stick with Mark Andrews. And at receiver, we're going to give Burrow his 2 favourite weapons in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but also hopefully add a new dynamic with George Pickens stretching the field as well. As you would probably expect, the AFC North defense is going to look pretty scary. We're going to go with a 3-4, and I think we have the perfect personnel to fit that system as well. Michael Pierce is a true nose tackle. He's 355 pounds and obviously really clogs up the lanes. which frees up a couple of absolute pros in the pass rush. At 3 tech, we're going to have Cameron Hayward and Nnamdi Madubuike. Just the perfect 3 tech duo. And then probably the scariest duo of this entire video, TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. I mean, that could win this whole thing because there's no way of dealing with that. Then you add the second best linebacker in the league in Roquan Smith, pair him up with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Denzel Ward and Marlon Humphrey at cornerback, really solid cornerback duo, and another incredible duo with Minkah Fitzpatrick and Kyle Hamilton at safety. With Minkah Fitzpatrick's ability to cover, he can drop back and play free safety. That should really free up Kyle Hamilton, who can also do it all, but at 6'4", you really want him coming down and making hits. So that looks like the best defense of this entire video. You've got Joe Burrow, you've got some good weapons, should be able to run the ball efficiently with Arthur Smith at OC and Derrick Henry, a good offensive line. AFC North could be the one. But now we get to the AFC West. I'm not going to split up that Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes combination. They have that chemistry. I don't know how much involvement Andy Reid actually has in terms of calling the plays on offense nowadays, but I know that he certainly has the ability. And what people miss is that the Chiefs this year have had one of, if not the best defense in the league, run by Steve Spagnuolo. So we're going to take the 2 Chiefs coaches here. Obviously, it is going to be Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Creed Humphrey is probably the best center in the league. Gives us a real chance to be able to run the ball. Joe Thuney and Quinn Miners, 2 really solid guards. Rashawn Slater should give us great protection as long as we're not going up against that AFC North defense. And I'm actually going to go with the rookie Joe Alt on the right side, which is kind of unbelievable to be saying that about a rookie, but that's how solid he's been right out of the gate. Running back is going to be Isaiah Pacheco. Tight end made me think for a moment because Brock Bowers has been unbelievable, but you've got to give Patrick Mahomes Travis Kelce. The only unfortunate thing here is that with 4 teams together, you're thinking we must be able to find a serious receiving trio, but this is going to be the worst receiving core of the video. I think Rashee Rice goes straight in. I'm not a huge fan of Rashee Rice, but I think part of what makes him slightly overrated is his production in this Chiefs offense, and we are going to have Andy Reid calling the plays. He's been the most productive receiver for Mahomes, so he's going to go in. The way I see it, Ladd McConkey actually goes straight in as well. He wouldn't have gotten into all of these receiving cores, but he was my wide receiver 1 coming out of the draft, and I think he's shown it. If you watch the film, he is looking like an elite receiver. It's the elusiveness in his route running that I love. He's got the speed. I just imagine if the Chiefs had taken him in the first round instead of Xavier Worthy, I honestly think you'd be seeing something special right now, but that's besides the point. The difficult part for me is who's going to be the third option. DeAndre Hopkins has just been brought in by the Chiefs. You've got Xavier Worthy, as we've just mentioned. Marquise Brown never quite proved himself to be an elite receiver with the Ravens or the Cardinals, and now he's coming off an injury. Cortland Sutton is a good receiver, not a great receiver, really. I'm going to go with the reliable DeAndre Hopkins, even at this stage in his career. As I mentioned, I've been a really big fan of the Chiefs' defense this year, mainly due to their ability to stuff the run. And they do this with their linebackers. They have 3 linebackers on the field the majority of the time, and we've got the perfect 3 to do the job. Nick Bolton, Robert Spillane, and Leo Chenal. Nick Bolton has been that really reliable tackle machine. Leo Chenal, super explosive, and those 2, Nick Bolton and Leo Chenal, can both play coverage without looking too much of a liability, which covers up for Robert Spillane, who this year hasn't been great in coverage, but has been really, really good at stuffing the run. With these linebackers in place, it means we don't have to worry too much about defending the run with our front 4. We can just have guys who go and get the quarterback, and that's exactly what Chris Jones does. Pair him up with Christian Wilkins, who unfortunately is looking to have a pretty serious injury right now after his move to the Raiders, but he doesn't have a long-running injury history, so hopefully he's going to recover and be just fine. And what an edge rushing combination we have here with Max Crosby and Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack, even at his age, still producing the goods. At cornerback, we're going to go with Trent McDuffie, who's been a big part of why the Chiefs are able to have 3 linebackers defending the box all the time, because he can produce sticky coverage and not have too much help. And Pat Surtain is still one of the best lockdown corners in the league. At safety, we're going to have Brandon Jones and Derwin James. A little bit underwhelming considering the quality of safety combinations we've had previously. Derwin James, not quite the same as he was back in the day, but he is still very good when it comes to being the traditional strong safety, coming downhill and making hits, which is why we've combined him with Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones, not so much built for the box traditional strong safety thing, but he can be a really solid free safety. So this one's weird. The AFC West, the defense looks great. I think especially with Steve Spagnuolo, he's got the perfect players at his dispense here to make this defense really work. And you've got Patrick Mahomes with Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, a pretty good offensive line. But then you look at these weapons, you look at these receivers, and it's just a complete outlier. Look at the AFC East. We left out Devontae Adams and Amari Cooper. They didn't make the cut. Either one of those would have been our wide receiver 1 in the AFC West. So weirdly enough, even in this experiment, it's still going to be the same conversation of what Mahomes can do with limited weapons. Finally, we've got the AFC South, and this could be a bad one. You've got Titans, Jaguars, Colts, and Texans. Not a ton of coaching options, but I think DeMeco Ryans has done a great job turning around the Texans. And Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator when the Eagles were at their best. I think he does a good job with the Colts, considering what he's working with. So DeMeco Ryans is going to be head coach, Shane Steichen as offensive coordinator. It's going to be CJ Stroud at quarterback. It's kind of a shame we couldn't find a way of getting a mobile quarterback in there, because that's really Shane Steichen's thing. Like I say, when the Eagles were at their best, it was Shane Steichen, and that was Jalen Hurts using his legs as well as a really good traditional running game to open up the passing game. And we are going to have a solid running game, almost purely due to the Colts. I mean, this is going to be basically a Colts running game, because you've got 3 guys who have been elite offensive linemen for the Colts since they drafted them, and it's been many years for all 3 of these guys. Ryan Kelly at center, Quentin Nelson at left guard, and Braden Smith at right tackle. I'm going to put Will Fries in there at right guard. Hadn't really proven himself until this year, but I think they must have stuck by him for a reason, and this year he's looked like a really effective run blocker. But then at left tackle, we are going to go with Laramie Tunsil, truly elite at blocking the quarterback's blindside. But going back to the Colts, we're going to have Jonathan Taylor at running back. Could have easily gone Dalton Schultz at tight end, but I think Evan Ingram is probably going a little bit underrated now as a receiving tight end. I think the way he's able to get open, and with his frame, it could work really well with a quarterback like CJ Stroud. Receiving wise, we've got to go with Nico Collins. I really want to have a look at him on film, because it seems like he's becoming maybe even a top 10 receiver. So he goes in at wide receiver 1, and then wide receiver 2 and 3. Brian Thomas is a rookie, but I've been really impressed by his ability to stretch the field. He looks like the most dynamic wide receiver that the Jaguars have, and it was going to be Brian Thomas and Michael Pittman Jr. anyway, but with Stephon Diggs out indefinitely with a knee injury now, there's no real doubt for me that it's Nico Collins, Michael Pittman, and Brian Thomas Jr. On defense, DeMeco Ryans typically likes to go with a 4-3. The interior is going to be Jeffrey Simmons and Forrest Buckner. Should be really effective in terms of pass rushing, and luckily we've kind of got them covered with the 3 linebackers behind them. Devin Lloyd is really good at covering sideline to sideline, stretch runs, tosses, things of that nature, and Foyesade Oluokun and Azeez Al-Shir, just really solid traditional run defending linebackers. We've also got a pretty good edge combination in Josh Hines-Allen and Danielle Hunter. Cornerbacks feel like they could be taken advantage of. Derek Stingley, and I've gone with Tyson Campbell, who I'm a big fan of, but obviously with the quality of receiver they're going to come up against, it could be a bit tricky, but they are going to have a little bit more help than it looks, because even though we've gone with the 3 linebackers, Jalen Petrie, who I've got as safety, he's really more of a nickel. He's definitely going to be in and around the box. That's why we've got Quandre Diggs, a more traditional free safety. So Jalen Petrie is both going to sort of complete our run defense, but also give the linebackers a bit of help when they need an extra guy to cover the way a DB can. But that'll wrap it up in terms of building the teams. Now let's play this out and see who comes out on top. First matchup is going to be the NFC East versus the NFC West. And the NFC West honestly does look like one of the weaker defenses to me. I'm not sure about the interior, and even with Fred Warner there, it does feel like the NFC East would be able to run the ball on them to some extent. You've got that Prescott to Jake Ferguson connection. Tariq Woolen would be a really good matchup against AJ Brown and give you about as much chance as you can hope for against a receiver like AJ Brown. because unlike most DBs, Tariq Woolen does have that rare size and speed combination. Devon Witherspoon can probably do an okay job on whoever's in the slot, whether that's Malik Neighbours or Terry McLaurin, and Travarius Ward can probably do an okay job on the third receiver. However, I think that's a lot that has to go right for the NFC West, considering Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata can probably do an okay job against Nick Bosa and Jared Verse. Obviously, Nick Bosa, no one can really take him on one-on-one and expect to have good fortune, but you can probably slide a couple of guys across, have him double-teamed. Like I say, Javon Hargrave and Leonard Williams don't blow me away on the interior, and so I feel like you could get something going as the NFC East offense. And for the NFC West offense, the Shanahan offense, when it's working well, feels unstoppable. But it all comes down to the run game. If you can stop the run game, you really do give yourself a chance. And I look at the likes of Dexter Lawrence, Bobby Wagner, and Bobby Okereke. And then I look at Connor Williams, Laken Tomlinson, and Will Hernandez on the NFC West offensive line. I think this defense could stop Shanahan from running the ball, or at least limit the explosive runs. Now, it's a big difference having Matthew Stafford there, and of course you've got Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf, and you've still got Deebo Samuel, but I think this would kind of look like a disaster. Having Jalen Carter and Deron Payne at 3 tech would mean that the centre Connor Williams would probably have to take Dexter Lawrence on one-on-one, and that's a win for Dexter Lawrence every time. I mean, Dexter Lawrence has 10 sacks this year. That's Aaron Donald level. He's got 2 more sacks than any defensive lineman overall. He's got 2 more sacks than any edge rusher. And he's not even built like Aaron Donald. He's not even that sort of pass rushing specialist. He does an incredible job stuffing the run as well. But then we haven't even mentioned Micah Parsons. Luckily, the NFC West does have Trent Williams, but if it's having to be Trent Williams taking on Micah Parsons one-on-one, I think you're going to get plenty of pressure from Micah Parsons there, and so you're just not going to have time to set these plays up. The NFC East defense is going to be able to bring down Trevon Diggs and Darius Slay, have them really clamp down on these receivers because they know that Stafford hasn't got time to hold the ball, and ultimately the defense ended up swaying it for me. The NFC East takes it. Now for the NFC North versus the NFC South. This NFC South offense with Clint Kubiak, as we discussed, looks like they could really run the ball effectively. But this NFC North defense run by Dan Campbell is going to be very tough to run on. As the Lions are anyway, you've got the interior of the Lions, DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil. You've also got Alex Anzalone. This is basically the Lions' run defense, but instead of Jack Campbell, who is brilliant in his own right, you've got Blake Cashman, who I trust even more to come down and stop the run. And I just don't think the NFC South has any real chance here throwing the ball on this defense. Jalen Johnson and Jet Alexander is a ridiculously good cornerback combination. You've got Brian Branch in the slot, you've got Xavier McKinney at free safety, and whilst I'm a big fan of Drake London, I think Kyle Pitts has probably been underrated, but this doesn't look like the most dynamic receiving group in this video. On the other side, the Vikings offense is already good enough, as it is under Kevin O'Connell, but you replace Sam Darnold with Jordan Love, who I trust a little bit more. You really juice up the offensive line. You've got Sam Laporta now, DJ Moore and Amon-Ra St. Brown. The South would be tough to run on, as all of these teams are really. You know, if you really want to stop the run, you can. It just comes down to how much you're committing to it. But they can probably stop the run without over-committing too much because they've got Vita Vea and Derek Brown. However, I'm just thinking Jamel Dean and Paulson Adebo to cover some of these receivers, Carl Granderson and Yaya Diaby. I'm not sure they're going to get the better of Christian Darrisaw and Penei Sewell. So I'm reasonably comfortable taking the NFC North here. AFC East versus AFC West is definitely one of the most intriguing matchups of this video because it's Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. And my first thought is it's got to be AFC East. You never count out Mahomes, but Josh Allen is an incredible quarterback in his own right and doesn't usually have the likes of Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson and Jalen Waddle. The AFC West would absolutely shut down this AFC East run game. As we've discussed, their run defense is formidable. And then you look at Chris Jones, Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby and Khalil Mack. Regardless of who you've got on the offensive line, those four are going to find a way of creating pressure. And the thing is with Josh Allen, you do wonder how much better he would be if he had a really good offense, because once he's under pressure, he tends to just sort of do his own thing anyway. And so I started to wonder, we know what Mahomes is capable of without too many weapons. He makes whoever work, especially with the play calling of Andy Reid. And I say they've got no receivers, but I've spoken about how I'm a huge fan of Lad McConkey. I don't know if Christian Gonzalez or Sauce Gardner are the cornerbacks to guard Lad McConkey. Lad McConkey's so elusive, you kind of wish this defense was one of the nickel package defenses where you would have that smaller slot corner to cover McConkey, because that's really who you want. I questioned Greg Rousseau and Hassan Reddick getting to Mahomes, beating out Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. So I really did question this, but ultimately I couldn't help but come back to the combination of Josh Allen doing his thing, making things happen on his own, and also the fact that no one's going to be able to cover all three of Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson and Jalen Waddle. And so I did, with a level of hesitance, go with AFC East here. Moving on to AFC North versus AFC South. Initial impressions was certainly AFC North. This is one for me where even though the AFC South have those three linebackers, DeForest Buckner and Jeffrey Simmons aren't the toughest run defenders, they're more pass rushers, and with a good offensive line, Arthur Smith being a run-orientated offensive mind, I think you could really wear this defense down with Derrick Henry. And so you'd start to weaken them up, which is when you start calling the play action and having Joe Burrow dissecting with probably a cleanish pocket. I know they've got Josh Allen and Danielle Hunter, but Ronnie Stanley is seriously reliable left tackle, and Jack Conklin is a very reliable right tackle as well. As I've alluded to when we spoke about the AFC South, Derek Stingley and Tyson Campbell doesn't feel like the most reliable cornerback combination. I think you could have effective play action throwing the ball to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins and George Pickens. On the other side, you probably could have some level of success against this defense, but probably not much. With the three interior defensive linemen, and you've got Raquan Smith, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, those two are very effective stopping the run. Kyle Hamilton and Minka Fitzpatrick coming down making hits as well. And what really closes it out to me is I don't see the AFC South having any real success in the passing game. Something that I forgot to mention was that I quite liked the three receivers we have for the AFC South because they're all bigger, and so you can create some mismatches, which does sort of come to fruition here. Denzel Ward and Marlon Humphrey are actually kind of smaller defensive backs, but is it even going to get that far when you've got Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, Nnamdi Madubuike? I just don't think Stroud would have time to throw the ball. So this is very much AFC North, but now we get to the championship games, starting with the NFC East versus NFC North. We know that the NFC North can shut down the run, and they've probably got just about enough in coverage. Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson give Dak Prescott a bit of time, despite Aiden Hutchinson probably lining up on Lane Johnson. That is, of course, dangerous. And then you're going to have Jalen Johnson doing a job on AJ Brown. Jair Alexander can probably cover Malik Neighbors or Terry McLaurin. We've got the extra nickel, Brian Branch, who can cover in the slot, and Xavier McKinney, an elite free safety, so he can cover deep if someone breaks loose. So I do think it would be a bit of a struggle, but then as it would for the NFC North against this NFC East defense, we know the defensive line is ridiculous, and that's going to be the only real question mark for the NFC North here. The North is tougher on the interior than the West was to try and deal with Dexter Lawrence, Jalen Carter and Deron Payne. However, they don't have Trent Williams, they've got Christian Darrisaw dealing with Micah Parsons. The East ultimately would get pressure on the North, but I think this offense could end up breaking down the defense. When you look at who the East have in coverage, Trevon Diggs and Darius Slay, not super reliable, a little bit inconsistent, and more importantly, in terms of getting the ball out quickly, Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown are the perfect guys to allow that to happen. These are guys who are really good at getting open in short distance, so you start picking the defense apart underneath, and then once they try to clamp down, you've got the likes of DJ Moore and Justin Jefferson. Maybe you would have a couple of plays where you go really heavy on the offensive line. You have some sort of 2 or 3 tight end set just so that Jordan Love has a moment to breathe, because if he does have a few seconds to process, Justin Jefferson is certainly going to get open, as is DJ Moore. And so I ended up taking the North to win the NFC here. For the AFC, and weirdly enough, it's the East versus the North, just like the NFC, and this AFC North defense would cause issues for the East because Myles Garrett and TJ Watt are going to create pressure, and in fact I think the interior of the offensive line for the East is weaker than the tackles are, so Cameron Hayward and Nnamdi Madubuike would be creating pressure as well. We know Michael Pierce, Raquan Smith, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to shut down the run. I think this would become kind of a mess for Josh Allen. I think he'd be under constant pressure, and there'd be some explosive plays where he's escaping the pressure and hitting the likes of Tyreek Hill downfield. But then I also think if this was reality, Josh Allen does have mistakes in him, and I think this would be one where he's throwing some wayward balls, probably have 3 or 4 interceptions. And the AFC North, in terms of offense, it certainly doesn't excite me the way the East does, but I think it would be a lot more consistent. It would be kind of the opposite of the North. They'd be running the ball, they'd be wearing down this defensive line, and then Joe Burrow to dissect. And I don't think this would be a high-scoring game, but I just think Joe Burrow and the North, there wouldn't be any mistakes. It would be a sort of consistent grind and wearing down of the defense, and a few mistakes from Josh Allen would end up tipping the game in the North's favour, which means it's actually going to be the NFC North versus the AFC North in the Division Bowl. We know all about both these teams by now, so I won't speak about all the fine details. This would be another low-scoring game for me, as you come to expect from the AFC North defense. They'd be creating the pressure with Garrett and Watt, but it's the same story. The NFC North have the ability to throw to the likes of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta underneath, and at least get something going. You could probably expect a mistake or two from Jordan Love in this one as well. However, when I looked at the NFC North defense versus this AFC North offense, I just think there would be no way you can get anything moving, because this is a defense where I think you could shut down Derrick Henry, the toughness of the interior, the linebackers Anzalone and Blake Cashman. But the killer here is that I actually don't think the AFC North have the weapons to trouble the NFC North at all. Jalen Johnson and Jair Alexander are very much capable of handling Jamar Chase, T. Higgins and George Pickens, with the help of Brian Branch in the slot and Xavier McKinney at free safety, generating a bit of pressure from Aiden Hutchinson as well. I ended up going with the NFC North to win it all. Congratulations, you have won my imaginary competition. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. A lot of work went into this video, and I'm working really hard to get more consistent content out. So if you are enjoying it, please consider subscribing. Let me know if there's a video that you have in mind that you'd like me to make, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.